Hello, all you flower-powered deviants, and welcome to another episode of Texting with me, Tomek, in St. Petersburg.
And with me, Mark Will in Taipei.
Well, I've officially come out, hence the flowers surrounding me. I feel angelic now that I've liberated myself, and no, okay. Um, so, I'm kidding. Not that I care about things like that, but today we're talking about this wonderful plant, uh, the Helianthus, and I've got one in a pretty significant state of decay. Those of you who are watching the video, actually, I had to retrieve this from the trash today because my wife decided it was past its due date, and then I reprimanded her accordingly. And after visiting, I guess, 4 different florists, actually, we rejected this sunflower yesterday because we didn't think it was like that impressive compared to some of the ones we've seen. But I came back for it today because it was the only one I could find. It was at the flower shop next to the metro station, Chkalovskaya. I think you know maybe that Russians are obsessed with flowers. Have we talked about that?
No,
Yeah, there's like
I do
24
know. I
hour
do
flower
know
shops
that.
everywhere.
I didn't know that. I do
Yeah.
know that. From my research for this episode, I do know that the sunflower is the national flower of Ukraine. So is that why you couldn't find one in Russia? They're like preventing people from selling sunflowers.
Look at that placement there. That's kind of nice. Uh, I'm going to stay neutral on that topic, Mark. I'll let you do the political commentary given my geographical location.
Well, maybe it would have been better for the state of the world if the U.S. taxpayer had sent Zelensky a shit ton of sunflowers instead of, weapons,
That would be nice.
weapons of
And
death and destruction. But hey, I didn't
and
make the
sunflowers have
decision.
many uses. You can grind them into a meal. You can squeeze them for their oil. You can eat the seeds. So yeah, definitely more useful than bombs. Um,
Is that why you picked this topic? Why did you
so
choose the sunflower as our text today? Please explain.
sure. Well, first of all, despite the fact that we tend to give these rather elaborate season previews where we outline all our topics, I'm sure our listener will have noticed that we end up usually, as you say, calling an audible most weeks. So I think I like that jazz aspect, and I guess we had some sunflowers in the house at that time because it's my favorite flower, and I felt like it would be fun to do something a bit unorthodox. We'd be responding more to like a direct physical object, like we kind of did with the water episode. I wonder how this is affecting my reception here, this sunflower. Um, and and then there are some significant texts which I'm quite attached to, namely Blake's Ah Sunflower and Ginsberg's Sunflower Sutra, which is clearly in dialogue with the former.
Yes.
So, yeah, I thought there's some different artistic discussions we can have around the sunflower, but also it's a beautiful creation of the universe that we could respond to aesthetically.
So this is interesting. You say it's your favorite flower. I love flowers. Maybe I'm part Russian and don't know it, but I delight in the colors of flowers. I find them beautiful, but I have to say the sunflower is one of my least favorite flowers.
Okay.
There's something about the what's called what I learned is called the flower head or the disc, right? The disc of the sun, which I dislike. I mean, it looks like a gigantic insect eye, which is a bit creepy to me. Now the what are called the rays, the ray flowers, the yellow petals around the disc, they're lovely. They're very beautiful. But that eye in the middle, that flower head, that disc of florets, I find it creepy and scary. And
Yeah,
the fact that it's alive in a way, it's heliotropic. It turns toward the sun. Uh
apparently only in
there's
its
something
youth, but yeah.
okay. All right. Well, there's something that I've always found disturbing about it. There's the famous Van Gogh series of paintings, and we had a reproduction of probably the most famous Van Gogh sunflower painting. There's the vase with, I don't know, three or four of them, right?
There are
And
five, I guess, of the famous ones. There are five at present. I'm going to be seeing one in about 10 days in London. Yo. Anyway,
okay, all right.
but yeah,
Well,
there's one in
we had a
Amsterdam, one in New York, and
reproduction.
so on. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen the one at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam,
Nice.
but we had a reproduction of one of those paintings, um, at which for some reason my mom, put on the wall of our hallway, and I never. I mean, I love Van Gogh, but I was never particularly impressed with that painting. It just wasn't my favorite.
But
Uh,
you grew up with it
and
being part of your psyche then.
I think so. I think it was always. I mean, for as long as I can remember, it was there in the hallway, so I always saw it. But it
Respect to your
never.
mom.
Yeah, I guess. But I there are other flowers that I find more aesthetically appealing in terms of color and shape and form and so on. Um, Maybe as I was preparing for this episode, I was asking myself why. I think maybe it's because I'm more lunar than solar. I'm not a day person or a morning person. I'm a nocturnal creature, a vampire. So there's something about the brightness of the sunflower which makes me uneasy, I think. And then,
Okay.
as I say, that insect eye in the center also triggers me to some extent, or I don't know if it triggers me. It makes me feel unnerved, let's say.
Couple things I'd like to say in response. First of all, it sounds like you discovered the same thing that I did in your research. So apparently, the sunflower is not one flower, but each of these quote unquote petals is an individual flower. Did you realize that?
Uh,
I don't exactly know what that
Not.
means, but that's what all the people I was watching, like YouTube videos and so on, that's what they all insisted.
I I wasn't clear about that, but it did what I read, which was basically Wikipedia. It did seem to distinguish between the flower head, the insect eye, which consists of what are called florets, which are
Which are individual flowers.
tiny
Yeah.
flowers, yeah, little flowers. But then the petals, what I would think of as the petals, are called ray flowers, plural. So
Right.
I
Right.
guess, yeah, each one is its own separate flower, which is, I don't know if that's
That
unusual or
that
not.
further
Maybe it is.
terrifies you.
That is pretty, yeah, that's pretty spooky.
And then my question, because I don't think we can really offer our listener much in terms of the biology aspect, but I do have some interesting things about the evolution, which we can talk about later. But as far as the seeds, like the sunflowers that we have, can we see the seeds, or what? Are the seeds gonna come? Where the seeds come later? Like, what's the deal with the seeds?
You
Do you
mean
know? I don't know.
the seeds that people eat?
Yeah, like, are they just not produced by the type of sunflowers that we bought, or what's up?
Well, you're right.
Do you know?
We're out of our depth here. We're not botanists.
Okay. It feels
Not
like that
even
should be pretty
close.
basic, though. These, to find the seeds that are huge usually and like have a shell,
Right.
right?
Maybe they're under the florets. That's just speculation. I have no idea.
I'll have to ask my wife. She's better about this kind of stuff.
But I wanted to talk about my experience of buying this sunflower, which was my assignment. At the end of the previous episode on the Dharma bums, you told me that I needed to go find an actual sunflower, purchase it, and bring it home,
Right.
which I dutifully did. I was I found like a, can we say, a bouquet of sunflowers. It was like three or four of them in plastic wrap.
Do you remember the price? I'm just curious how it compares.
They were 150 NT. That's like $5. But that was,
For the bouquet or for individual?
yes, that was for three or four of them.
It's pretty cheap.
Yeah, but I didn't think we were going to record so soon, so I didn't get them yesterday, which meant I had to get one today. So I went back to that same grocery store, sold out. So someone here took that bouquet of sunflowers. So I, checked Google, found another florist nearby, rolled up and asked, Yomeo Shangrekui. Shangrekui is the Chinese for sunflower. And they
Nice.
had, so I got one, and this is how they presented it to me. First, she asked, it was the stem was longer, and then she asked, how short? And I said, I don't know. So she cut it here, put it in this plastic wrap. Those of you listening and not watching,
Yeah, we've been hearing
I'll try to describe it for you. You can hear the plastic, and there's a purple ribbon around it, so that's part of the presentation. I suspect I'm supposed to put this in water, but I haven't done that yet. Maybe after the episode. And oddly, there's not really a smell. There's not really a fragrance to mine, which is another thing I appreciate about flowers. Like
mine certainly has a fragrance. It's not necessarily like sweet as other flowers are, but it smells like plant.
Well, hey, maybe I have COVID and don't know it, but I still have my taste, so I think it's the flower.
Okay.
I really don't smell anything, but I was thinking about like my as I say, I love flowers, but I'm not a botanist. I'm not a gardener. I don't have the patience to like water plants every day. Unfortunately, in a way, I wish I did, but I just can't be bothered. I want them to just grow wild, and if I happen to encounter them, then I'll smell them and appreciate them, take pictures, and so on. But when I've bought flowers in the past, for lady friends, as a gesture of affection, I have almost always bought carnations because I like the shape and the color. Colors, I should say. They're different kinds of carnations. And when I went flower shopping for the first time, I noticed that they are the cheapest. So
they are pretty cheap, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my history of flower shopping for those interested, which is probably nobody. But I went to the flower shop today. I got this Shangrekui, and it was 60 NT for one. That's about $2. So this sunflower here rather big and long, um, roughly $2.
Okay, mine is about $3.50, but Russia is generally a bit pricier, I think, than other places that I'm accustomed to, and maybe
Wartime
part of
inflation, baby.
exactly that's true. The rush, so that nothing crazy happened. I was hoping that something crazy happened on your shopping expedition.
No, is pretty straightforward. I mean, I did have to go to a couple of places before I found one that was open, but
Okay,
um, all's well that ends well. I
yeah,
just wanted to say that we may as well talk about the Latin term. You alluded to it, Helianthus, right? Literally sun flower, but the full name is Helianthus annuus, the annual sunflower, which means what? It blooms once a year. It's an annual flower.
I know that the lifespan is around 9 months.
It lives a
So,
year then. Okay.
mm,
So it blooms once a year, then then dies. And
I'll just
those
add that
sunflower seeds that we can't locate somehow produce more
right,
sunflowers.
right, yeah. In Russian, they're called podsolnu, uh, which I haven't checked out too much. But pod means under, sun is like sol, so or solnitsa, so it's like under the sun, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, shall I talk a little bit about the evolution? Some interesting things that I discovered.
The
Yeah.
evolution of the sunflower.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that.
All right. I'll give a very micro, um, or macro history. So, apparently, the sunflowers are about 3.6 million years old, and they they did very well in the U.S. in particular, or North America, especially after indigenous humans, which came much later in the sunflower's individual history, obviously, because the human history is much shorter. But they burned a lot of the forest land which existed in America, and sunflowers flourished in more like these prairie landscapes. Uh, Apparently, they're also full of some defensive oleopathic compounds which inhibit the growth of other species. So there's kind of like a almost like a carnivorous element there, which maybe you subconsciously are privy to or aware of when you recoil from this beast.
Yes.
Uh, but generally, it seemed like they're very good for a plethora of other species, including bees, leaf beetles, jumping spiders, butterflies, crickets, grasshoppers, katydid, and weevils even mate and basically spend their whole life uh, in unison with the sunflower. They kind of so they mate there, then they something with the way that they interact with them essentially decapitate the flower, and then they consume it. So it's like their whole life is partnered with this parasitic relationship in a sense. They were
Well, the
domesticated.
North American, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all
I
good.
was just going to say that the North American connection that you mentioned is interesting because I read that the Zuni and the Inca used the sunflower in some of their religious rites
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
ceremonies. Yeah.
Right. So apparently they were formerly domesticated around 4 to 5 thousand years ago in North America. Spanish were the first to discover them from the Europeans, and they brought them back in the early 16th century, where they were quite popular with Europeans, but Europeans were slower to appreciate their more medicinal properties. So I guess it was mainly like an aesthetic experience, but then later they did realize that there were other uses. And the famous Swedish scientist Carl Linnaeus created this genus in 1752.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quote from him. Who can see this plant in flower, whose great golden blossoms send out rays in every direction from the circular disc, without admiring the handsome flower modeled after the sun's shape? So it is interesting how, I mean, I guess this is the case with many things, like many common foods we eat and so on, that these are relatively new human experiences for a lot of cultures, right? So,
Well,
like,
that
we
it's
can't talk
like
about.
it sounds like the tomato, which was
Yeah, that's what I
cultivated.
like. Right.
Yeah, it was cultivated in it was cultivated in the Americas, and then it went to Europe. And look, it's like one of the most important ingredients in Italian cuisine, for
Right.
example.
Right.
But
Right.
that was a new world import.
Mm. Yeah, so it's like a globalization, right? That now you can just kind of find these flowers everywhere, even if I did have to go to four different florists because they're out of season. But
Mm.
yeah, I still don't feel like I answered why I like sunflowers. So I just want to speak a little bit about the my aesthetic experience. I think I find their size quite impressive. Um, their height, obviously, they can grow to easily like 8 feet. And apparently, one of the first European botanists who encountered it was boastful about how he had grown a sunflower that was 14 feet tall. Um, yeah, so I think also like I was very cognizant of those poems from an early age. So not early age, but from my 20s. So that added to my attachment. And and I guess now reflecting a little bit, I like the fact that it's kind of coarse in the way that it's perceived. It's like a working man's flower in a way because it's not a flower that's exclusively associated with aesthetics, but has a lot of like actual power. I mean, actual value in terms of food and medicine. So that's kind of cool in my opinion. Um, yes, I would just say
Well, I feel
aesthetically
like
very impressive. Go on.
I may have underappreciated it. I mean, I didn't know, for example, that it was adopted as the symbol of the vegan movement.
Yeah,
Did
I didn't
you
know
come
that.
across that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, there. I don't know if it's called the Vegan Society or whatever, but their logo includes a sunflower. Apparently, of course, in Taiwan, I also being in Taiwan, I also have to mention the Taiwan sunflower movement of 2014. At that time, the KMT government was working on a cross straits agreement, like a trade
Do you want to
agreement.
explain what the KMT go? I don't know what that is.
That's basically the conservative government that was in power exclusively for many years. It was basically a one party government established. Well, when the KMT came to Taiwan, I mean, if you want to go back in time, we can talk about the conflict between KMT and the communists in mainland China, right? KMT is Chiang Kai-shek's party, so there's a civil war after the two were allied to fight the Japanese. There was a civil war between Chiang Kai-shek's KMT and Mao Zedong's Communist Party, right? And KMT fled to Taiwan, uh, from which they plan to retake the mainland. Well, that hasn't happened. They're still here, uh, and anyway, they ruled the island with an iron fist, more or less, for decades and decades, and then eventually, you know, things opened up, and another party was allowed to run for office and did take power. But when KMT was in power in 2014, they had like basically a secret agreement with mainland China, and they wouldn't publicize it. They wouldn't tell anyone what was in this cross straits agreement, like trade agreement. And so many people suspected that, you know, it was not favorable to the Taiwanese people, and the KMT was just doing the bidding of Beijing. So the opposition party, the DPP, Democratic People's Party, um, wanted a line by line explanation of what was in the agreement. And so there was a protest, and mostly student led, and they basically crashed the parliament or legislature. You know, they had their own January 6th, I guess you could say. They took over the parliament or legislature, or they occupied it. Let's say they occupied it, and a local florist, to show his support, sent the protesters and the students and so on a large amount of sunflowers. So it came to be called the Sunflower Movement.
Interesting. And
You
how
still
successful
awake?
was it?
That was pretty long winded.
That's okay. We got some history buffs, I'm sure, who appreciate it.
Yeah. I think some concessions were made, but the demands changed, and I don't know. Eventually, an agreement was reached, and I don't remember what the result was. I don't know if the agreement. I think there were some revisions made, or at least publicized. I don't remember, but
Okay,
the movement itself more or less fizzled out, as movements often do.
So just to clarify a couple points. So first of all, is the KPP still in power?
KMT,
KMT.
not at the moment, but you know, just like everywhere else, you've got basically a duopoly that just the two heads of the duopoly just take turns fucking the populace.
So there's the KMT and the
just
DPP?
Like everywhere else. Yeah. There are some other parties here. They're you know, more so than in the States and other places. There are some third party candidates that have success. I think the previous mayor of Taipei was a third party candidate, but I don't follow it closely. But you know, basically it's like KMT and DPP are analogous to Republicans and Democrats in the States.
I have a more important question, though. You down with DPP?
No.
Do you get that joke or no? Sorry. It's a reference to You Down with OPP. Do you know that song?
No, I thought you were making a reference to double penetration.
No.
Okay.
It's a classic song by Naughty by Nature. You down with OPP? Yeah, you know me. And OPP means other people's pussy.
Oh, okay.
It's quite crass, but it's kind of a classic hip hop reference. Anyway, no, my other question was, so this
you can
this
DPP the OPP.
Right. So
I know what
KMT
WAP
started out
is. Do you? WAP.
Sounds familiar.
Cardi B, baby.
Yeah, WAP. Something
WAP.
is it like, yeah, something. Well, P is pussy, right?
Ooh, yes, very good. P is pussy, everyone. WAP,
God,
wet ass pussy. Oh,
I'm not sending this link to my
I know
mom.
something. I know something you don't know about contemporary hip hop. I'm proud of myself.
You know, my
Yeah,
students
you see,
were.
my
Go on.
my my song "The Kingster" was censored by YouTube, thought to be too dirty, but WAP has like a billion views. That's okay. But "The Kingster," that's just too much for the YouTube audience.
Right. Okay, last thing about our obscure Taiwan political history discussion.
Yes.
So the KMT started out as an opposition party to the predominant Chinese party, right?
You mean
The
in
communists.
Taiwan? That
Well,
was
you just
on
said that the.
that was on the
Yeah, go on.
mainland, right? Like the
Right, right, right.
yeah, KMT was a mainland China party, but they basically lost the Civil War. They lost to the communists and fled to Taiwan, and then they came here. I mean, they it's a long history, but the 228, which is coming up in a few days, February 28th, uh, marks the or commemorates the massacre that KMT did uh, to like native Taiwanese people. They took all the doctors and lawyers and intellectuals who were protesting the KMT for basically coming over here and taking over the island, and they rounded them up and shot them down and said, "Okay, shut the fuck up." And then KMT ruled this island for decades and until they opened up in the 70s or 80s or whatever.
Well, I just
So
wanted to. So, but they were being accused of being essentially pro-China in this protest, even though they started out as an opposition to the present government. That's my.
oh
That's the
yeah,
only thing I
they've
wanted to
always
clarify.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. They've always been, well, always. I don't know when that started because as I say, when they first came here, KMT's plan was to regroup and then retake mainland China from
Right.
the communists. That was their goal. But at some point, they they became the party that was closely aligned with Beijing.
Okay. And are they more closely aligned with Beijing then today than like the DPP?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the Communist Party of China hates DPP because DPP sometimes uses the word independence or they don't do anything about it, but they in their rhetoric they talk about independence, and they refer to Taiwan rather than Chinese Taipei or Republic of China. So it's mostly, as far as I can tell, again, what do I know? I'm just dirty Lao Wai, just a foreigner here. But it's just rhetorical. Like both parties encourage business relations with the mainland.
And DPP is currently in
And
power?
both for the time being, but it goes back and forth. The pendulum swings back and forth just like everywhere else, right? You got A team and B team. When A team
But would both of
goes
these
too
parties
far, when
would
A
both of these
team goes
parties
too far,
go
you
on?
got to bring B team in
Would
to
both of these
to
parties
calm the people down.
I think this is like it's not your fault. It's just funny when we're like okay. So, would both of these parties roll out the red carpet for a US Secretary of State visit?
Well, that's what happened, right? When Pelosi came, she met with the DPP president, Tsai Ing-wen.
Okay, so they're simultaneously both these parties are simultaneously in favor of business relationship with China at the same
Well,
time they.
I don't think so. I don't think that would have happened under a KMT regime. I don't think, but maybe it could. Uh, Probably not, though.
Okay, but essentially they're just kind of seeing who's gonna sponsor them more, right? And out of these two powers, as far as like the U.S. versus China.
Well, again, there is that difference between the two parties. You know, they're both corporate whores, but the, the difference is that DPP encourages a less friendly relationship with the mainland. Even though they're economic ties, there's still like this talk about independence. And I think Tsai Ing-wen, the president, said something like, you know, we don't need to. Maybe this was her way of avoiding the issue. She said, well, we don't need to declare independence. We are independent. We are Taiwan. We are a country, whether anyone recognizes it or not. And of course, the U.S. maintains that position of strategic ambiguity, right? Like they say, on the one hand, they say Taiwan is part of China and it's the Republic of China. But on the other hand, we're not going to accept it
Wait, the
if,
U.S. says that Taiwan is part of China?
yes, that's the strategic ambiguity. They say that in their rhetoric, but then they also say things like, but if the mainland invades, there's going to be trouble. You know, they're going to, they're planning to make it Ukraine 2.0 at some point.
I
If,
know we've
if,
strayed incredibly off the topic,
if
but
it's, if it suits them. Yeah, what we're
so,
talking about sunflowers here. Let's get
but
back to the flower.
is Taiwan part of China? Like,
Well, it's called the
I don't know.
Republic of China. I mean, it's
Is there like an
again, it's
analogy you
an
could make with, or is there an analogous international situation to the relationship
well,
that Taiwan has with China?
I mean, what people here are worried about is that Taiwan will become like Hong Kong, um, where there is one country, two systems, right? Like Hong Kong was independent, more or less, and closely associated with uh, the
Britain,
UK, and was
right?
actually, yeah, was actually under, I don't know, UK protection or whatever until I don't remember the dates. I want to say 1999, but then
I
you
think a
know,
bit earlier, but I could be wrong.
I think maybe, but since then, you know, Beijing has had more and more influence there, and you saw what happened. Like there were some protests which were probably organic, and then the U.S. tries to get involved and stir shit up, just like they do everywhere, right? So the slogan for that relationship is one country, two systems, right? Like,
Hmm.
okay, officially you're part of China, but you're kind of not. Again, ambiguity, strategic ambiguity. Everyone seems to benefit from the status quo. So sometimes there are these rhetorical arguments, but most people have the common sense to just leave it alone. That's why, you know, it was reckless for Pelosi to come here and stir shit up. Like, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
there had been like, you know, this had not been done for decades, and everything was pretty relaxed. But then people start to get agitated when there's like provocation of that sort. Um,
right.
but fortunately, so far, the tensions have not escalated, and let's hope they don't. Because again, my fear is that Taiwan will become Ukraine 2.0, and I would prefer that not happen while I'm here.
Yeah.
After I leave, of course, fuck it. They can. do whatever. But I'm here now, so let's not let that
He's
happen.
being facetious, guys. Don't worry.
Well,
He's
I
actually
I, I am. That would be
he's a
bad
beacon of
for
compassion.
that would be bad. That would be bad for everyone concerned. That would be bad for the whole world. Uh, you know, two nuclear superpowers facing off in one proxy nation is enough for the world to deal with. We don't need more of that shit.
Yeah.
This has become quite a political episode. We're supposed to be talking about the aesthetic
Yeah.
beauty of the
Okay.
flower, and we're
So,
40 minutes in.
all right, let's jump to the poetry. Yeah, does that sound okay?
Do it.
All right, we're gonna start with William Blake's poem, which is a very complicated poem. Despite maybe some of Blake's poems being kind of, I don't want to say straightforward, but there is a certain simplicity, I would say, to some Blake poems. Not in a reductive way, but the theme is quite clear in many of his poems, I would say. But this one is a bit maybe more ambiguous or leaves more to interpretation. So I'll read it. It's
Well, you're
short,
talking
so
about the lyric poems, not, I mean, like the poems of the songs of innocence and experience, not like the prophetic books. Those are not
right,
straightforward at all.
for sure. All right. I won't read the Ginsberg because I think it's quite long, but I think I can read the Blake.
Mm-hmm.
So, sunflower. Sunflower, weary of time, who countest the steps of the sun, seeking after that sweet golden clime where the traveler's journey is done, where the youth pined away with desire, and the pale virgin shrouded in snow, arise from their graves and aspire where my sunflower wishes to go. All right. Do you want to give this a shot first and say anything maybe that you like about this poem or anything that stands out for you? And if not, I'll jump in. But
Well, I'll just share an anecdote. When I first
okay,
read this as a teenager, uh, that's when I, first began to study Blake. Uh, I stuffed my mouth full of cookies and I went into the kitchen and I recited this poem to my brother. So with a mouthful of cookies, I said, "Oh, sunflower," and he laughed so hard that he spit his drink everywhere.
okay, nice,
So that's my
nice. That's
that's
hilarious.
my that's my contribution to this discussion.
Why did you
This
do
is
that?
not,
Just for the comedy?
yeah, just to
Okay,
make him laugh. And I
okay,
was I
nice.
was reading this and trying to decipher it, and then I just stuffed my mouth full of cookies and read the first
Fuck it,
line. Yeah.
nice.
This is not, my favorite Blake poem, so maybe you can explain why you like it so much, or
Okay,
what
I
it
mean,
does for
I
you,
like the
why it
Ginsberg
resonates with
more.
you.
I like the Ginsberg more,
Okay.
but it obviously spoke to Ginsberg. This poem. Um, I think I like the sympathy in a way in the first stanza that's shown the sunflower. I like this weary, and that kind of relates to how Ginsberg will talk about it as well. This kind of battered old thing, right? So it's weary. Uh, it's seeking after that sweet golden clime, which we can assume is something like heaven, unless you want to offer a different interpretation.
No, that's
Where
what
the
I thought.
traveler's journey is done, right?
Right.
So then that's how we kind of know that. So I like this idea that I like thinking about the steps of the sun as the movement of the sun each day, right? So it's like, because I was thinking about that line in the beginning and was kind of thinking more about the actual climb of steps that the sunflower was doing, but I think it's maybe more logical to think of it as, yeah, just the sunflower is the witness to this movement from east to west. It's east to west, right? Sun always sets in the, or is it west to east?
Rises in the east and sets in the west.
Okay, so thank you. So I like this idea that the sunflower is just bearing witness to this daily parabola. Is parabola the right word there?
Mm,
Is that a half circle
Mm, could be.
or semicircle? Anyway, okay.
It's yeah. It's not exact half oval maybe.
Okay. So, yeah, I like that. I think that it gets quite interesting in the second stanza and quite complex. So, yeah, I mean, if the poem stood alone just as the first stanza, then it would just be a poem about desire, this kind of reaching, possibly because it's seeking after the golden climb, and yearning, possibly, and just the effect that time has on us in terms of wearing us down. But then we got where the traveler's journey is done, full stop. Where the youth pined away with desire, and the pale virgin shrouded in snow. So these images, first of all, I guess that the where here in the fifth line also refers to heaven.
That sweet golden climb.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll give you some kind of predominant like mainstream interpretations, and then maybe you can go somewhere with that. So the pale virgin shrouded in snow, it's not really a positive image. This virgin is pale. Um so it's generally read as like she's denied herself, or he's denied himself. It's unfulfilled. uh I don't know how we read the youth pined away with desire, whether we read that as positive or negative. I mean, it doesn't have to be either, I guess. But one interpretation would be that heaven is the place where that we're born, and then we kind of struggle in some way, either pining or remaining a virgin. And the virgin here, okay, so there's like a Christian interpretation, like a traditional Christian interpretation, which would be like, by denying himself or herself, you then aspire to heaven, where you no longer have, like, it's like the reward for this denying,
Well,
right?
the pale virgin shrouded in snow reminds me of another line from Blake. I think it's the Proverbs of Hell. Sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse unacted desires. I think that's the line. So when you're talking about Blake, it's like if you're denying yourself sexual pleasure, or you're not acting on your desires, you're not doing something good and virtuous. You're actually wasting energy, or you're missing out on an opportunity to express your creative energy. So
Exactly. I
yeah.
That's why this first reading isn't very convincing for me, knowing Blake's typical tropes. So,
Yeah.
because either we've got this first reading, where heaven is a blissful eternity, that where you don't experience a weariness of time, but where we all kind of escape this constant sense of desire that we are inevitably experience here. Or, and maybe it's not either or, but you could also see the golden climb as a distraction, that stops people from experiencing in the here and now, which would be like a great sin for Blake. So that could be interesting, I guess, to think of this golden climb as actually the villain in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, the
It's
the
not
line,
easy.
no, it's, and I feel like the punctuation adds to the confusion, but the line, arise from their graves and aspire, seems significant, right? Like there's this theme of
Mm-hmm.
resurrection. And just like the sun dies and is resurrected every day. And this is why we have so many solar gods, right? Like uh, gods that die and are resurrected or resurrect themselves.
Well, and aspire, I
This
guess.
seems like.
Go on.
Mm-hmm. No, you continue.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, aspire. The way that we use it now is more like going back to seeking. Like you're aspiring to be something. But I think right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in that time or here, it's more just to rise high. So it's just these people ascending into heaven, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like being aspirational. I mean, what is Blake trying to say then with this youth and this virgin? Is there a reading that is clear to you, or are we just going to kind of leave it as
Well,
something
I
that's
think
quite challenging to decipher?
I think we should adopt the principle of strategic ambiguity. Just
Okay.
just let it mean what it means. Let's not disrupt the status quo
Do you see
in this
arise
case.
as being like an imperative form, or
Again,
is it more
that's
like
it.
what they're
I think
doing?
it's I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. Like it depends on how you understand the way it's punctuated, and I think both readings are implied. Like it could just be straight indicative. Youth and pale virgin do this; they arise from their graves and aspire. But
Right.
it does seem to have like a command aspect,
Right.
right? It does seem to be imperative in a way.
Critics also point out that this is from Songs of Experience. So Songs of Experience tends to highlight the struggles, the strife,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you'd expect this to maybe not have a happy ending where we all just go to the sweet golden climb and hang out, right?
Right.
It's maybe more about maybe we should stick more with the reading of yeah, don't focus on just seeking after that sweet golden climb and being a pale virgin. I don't know. All right. Do you know much about this vision that Ginsberg experienced of Blake speaking this poem to him? I
Uh,
meant to do more research into that, but I didn't get a chance
I
to.
didn't. I
I
mean,
just,
I know about his experience with Blake, but I didn't know it was this particular poem.
yeah.
Okay.
Either way, it seems like one of the most critical experiences that Ginsberg goes through as a human is this like vision, right? It's quite significant to have a vision in the first place. We know Blake had visions, but yeah. So
I
this
read.
poem,
I don't.
Sunflower,
I
go
don't
on.
know if this is true, but I read that he was masturbating while reading Blake, and
Yeah.
then he had a vision.
Yes. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's for example that, and I know I've read about that as well.
for
That there's
whatever
somehow
that's
this is all
worth.
right. It's all connected to. There's definitely an aspect of masturbation there. Um, I'm not sure how we should approach Sunflower Sutra, except to first I want to say that it's. I'd probably put it in my top 10, 20 poems of any writer. Like I love this poem. Um, so many lines to me that kind of stick with me. Maybe we don't have time and for a whole reading, but I'd encourage people to read this poem. And I'll just first maybe start with a few lines that I really like. Okay, like
Mm-hmm.
I like well the first stanza. I walked on the banks of the Tin Can Banana Dock and sat under the huge shade of a Southern Pacific locomotive to look at the sunset over the Box House Hills and cry. That idea of just that sense of defeating you just go there to cry in a way. And then Jack Kerouac sat beside me, and I don't know, I wouldn't say he's like, what do you call that when you like shout out someone who's famous? You're like, yo, this other celebrity's with me.
Name dropping.
Yeah, name dropping. I don't think he's necessarily name dropping, but it is pretty massive for him to be like saying, yo, I'm with this dude.
Well,
which we know that actually,
he also name drops Joe's Greasy Sandwiches. So
right. Yeah, it's an endorsement there, a sponsorship deal they had
it's
going
product placement.
Yeah, but
and Blake, he shouts out Blake, memories of Blake, my visions,
right?
Harlem and hells of the Eastern Rivers.
Well, he shouts out Whitman as well in like Supermarket to California.
Sure.
Is that the title?
Mm-hmm.
But no, I just wanted to say like Kerouac actually was huge in developing Ginsberg's style, and so Kerouac is a massive inspiration for Ginsberg. So I like this stanza though. Jack Kerouac sat beside me on a busted, rusty iron pole. Companion, we thought the same thoughts of the soul. I always liked that, like the power of this friendship, that they thought the same thoughts of the soul. It's very so. I'm saying a lot of the reasons I like this poem are quite sentimental. I think this poem is very sentimental, and romantic. It's a classic tension. This like industrialization versus our more human. This is a very romantic trope, right? But just so many kind of emotional lines with unbattered old thing you were, my sunflower, oh my soul, I loved you then. It's there's no real, you don't get that kind of formality that you get in a lot of modernist poetry, I would say. A perfect beauty of a sunflower. I was thinking today, I would love to share this poem with my students, but you can't really because of a lot of the sexual stuff. Like in the second page on my document,
the cunts of wheelbarrows.
The cunts of wheelbarrows, the milky breasts of cars. That's so Ginsberg too, calling out body parts. But I like that. I really like that.
And then worn out asses out of chairs and sphincters of dynamos.
Yeah, that's so Howell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love the following stanza. A perfect beauty of a sunflower, a perfect, excellent, lovely sunflower existence, a sweet, natural eye to the new hip moon, woke up alive and excited, grasping in the sunset shadow, sunrise, golden monthly breeze. And that kind of lack of punctuation kind of listing is also very Ginsbergian. And then I just think the whole conclusion, this like gradual crescendo, we're not our skin of grime, and then toward just really, now I've practically recited half the poem, but there's a lot of quotables here and a lot of invocations and just the idea that now he's got a mission, right? He's grabbed up the skeleton thick sunflower and stuck it at my side like a scepter, and deliver my sermon to my soul and Jack's soul too, and anyone who will listen. It's it's like it's a sermon, it's a inspirational tract in a way, right? I mean, it's called a sutra.
It is a sutra, yeah.
What do you think of this poem? Things you like, things you dislike,
well,
anything?
I mean, I remember reading it as a teenager, and I've read it maybe a couple of times since then. It's not my favorite of his. It doesn't move me in the way it moved you, but it's interesting to hear what you like about it. And there are some great lines in it, those that we've talked about, and this notion that we're golden sunflowers inside, blessed by our own seed and hairy naked accomplishment, bodies growing into mad black formal sunflowers in the sunset,
and just insisting that we are not, right, we're not this grime,
right?
We are more than the machines that are that are starting to dominate our existence.
Mm-hmm.
It's very relevant, obviously, today.
Yeah, I can feel that. But maybe my connection to other Blakean verses and poems and so on, like I have stronger connections to other pieces by Blake, stronger than what I feel for Ah Sunflower. Other than that
Mm-hmm.
happy memory of reciting it with the mouthful of cookies,
Right.
that's pleasant. But because of that, this is not a parody of Blake's piece, but it's like a meditation on on Blake's Sunflower. So because the original didn't have as much meaning for me, the meditation on the original also didn't resonate with me in the same way.
But here, the criticism of industrialization is much more explicit, right? In Blake's, we don't have that same contrast
Mm,
that's constant in this poem.
yeah.
Um, and I think coming back to just my more visceral relationship to the sunflower, perhaps this has tinted my vision of the sunflower and seeing it as something of an underdog again, even though
Well, probably
it's not an
so.
underdog, but but I'm rooting for it now. You know, I see it and I'm like, I feel it
Well,
affirming itself and affirming
yeah.
life.
Well, as I hear you talk about it, I am questioning my lack of enthusiasm for it. I mean, I'm appreciating it more, and there is, you know, certainly that solar aspect of resurrection, which is implicit in the sunflower, and who doesn't love that, right? Like you always, there's always another day. Tomorrow is another day.
Right.
Actually, as I was researching this, I asked myself, is there a D.H. Lawrence poem on the sunflower? Because he wrote so much about flowers and nature and animals. I mean, he even has a collection called Birds, Beasts, and Flowers, I think. But
I remember that.
yeah, but there doesn't seem to be one on sunflowers. He writes about other flowers and uh, animals, birds, obviously. Uh, so I was hoping like there would be a Lawrencian meditation on the sunflower, which could give me a different perspective on it, but I wasn't able to find one.
Well, we can also talk a little bit about this Van Gogh series, Sunflowers.
Well, we're already over an hour, but okay, we can. What about the Beach Boys Sunflower? Were they do you
And
think
that,
do you think they were influenced by Ginsberg?
I'm not sure. Do you?
I don't know. Uh
I've really been enjoying it, though. I'm
well,
listening to it this
it's
week.
a I realized I had heard it before, but yeah, it's been on rotation over here the past couple of days. I like it because there are more songs by Dennis Wilson, the drummer. He,
Okay.
Brian Wilson is the so-called genius of the Beach Boys. He composed most of their songs and had all of these interesting harmonic ideas and was into sonic experimentation. But Dennis Wilson, the drummer, who, by the way, had an affair with Christine McVie.
Hmm. Are they relations, by the way?
Yeah, they're
The Wilson
brothers. Yeah,
surname
yeah,
is that?
yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Dennis,
Sorry, I
Brian,
didn't
and
know.
Carl were brothers, and then their cousin, the insufferable Mike Love, was one of their singers, and then a friend of theirs was in the band, Al Jardine, and then Bruce Johnston was another friend or guy that they picked up later. But Dennis was interesting because he was he was more of a rocker than the others. So I always like to hear some of his songs, and he's got 4 on this album. He didn't usually contribute so much. He's got an interesting. I think I alluded to it in the Christine McVie episode. He's got an interesting and rather sketchy relation with the Manson family. Um, he was banging some of Charlie Manson's girls, and then I think he may have known about some of the murders, but he was so doped up and scared that he didn't report it, or maybe he knew more than is generally assumed. But he had an unhappy
Sunflowers.
He had an unhappy life. Well, we're talking about Sunflower. We're talking about this album that features. I mean, it's one of the descriptors of this kind of music is sunshine pop, and you can certainly hear that, right? Like it's got a very sunny, almost too much at times. Like I'm not always in the mood for that kind of harmonizing, but when one is in the mood, it can be pretty powerful. But as I say, I'm more of a vampire. I'm more of a lunar soul or lunatic.
Yeah, I didn't really know much about the Beach Boys. I still don't really know much beyond like this kind of almost parody of who they are with some of their hits, like I'm not really keen to listen to Surfin' USA all the time at all. But the older I get, the more I realize there's much more to them than this, and like this album is very impressive to me. So
well, try Pet Sounds.
This has just been
Have you heard that?
Well, Pet Sounds, I know that's like considered their magnum opus, but this album seems like it's also right up there for critics. Like I think I sent you some of the stuff where it says this is listed in the top 500 albums of all time, and it's sometimes just considered their second best album.
Right.
But it's just an interesting band because I don't really know what I don't understand where they are in the musical pantheon. I don't know much about their influences. I have noticed that one of my favorite contemporary bands, which I probably told you, is Animal Collective. And as I listen to Beach Boys now, I'm like, whoa, I totally hear Animal Collective, which obviously maybe is the other way around, but Animal Collective may have been influenced by the Beach Boys with some of these like crazy harmonies. And yeah, so I'd like to learn more because and maybe as I'm getting older, I kind of like sweeter music and more music. We've talked about this before that I can listen to with my wife. So since the Christine McVie, I can't stop listening to Fleetwood Mac and Christine McVie. And I feel like the Beach Boys are also kind of like a type of aesthetic that is very good for having around the house, and like my wife, I had it on this morning and she liked it and stuff. So yeah, it's like good middle-aged music.
Add a little music to your day.
Yeah, and I love the lyrics to that, even if they're slightly trite. They're really sweet and very understandable. Like, I mean, they articulate the words clearly. I feel like there's a Beatles influence, or again, vice versa. But I mean, I hear aspects of the Beatles in some of their songs.
Oh, yeah.
You know more about the Beach Boys. Do you want to give a really quick
I'm
description? Or
I'm not a big Beach Boys fan. Again, I would recommend,
even if you're not a fan, but
I would recommend
maybe
Pet
you
Sounds.
understand.
Well, I know more about them in relation to the Beatles, right? There was a kind of rivalry, mostly one-sided. Like the Beach Boys, particularly Brian Wilson, was trying to compete with Lennon McCartney.
Okay, no, I don't know.
Well, he said, I think he said something like, I just saw God in the form of 4 young men. And he was so impressed and overwhelmed that he wanted to quit music. Um,
Wow.
but but McCartney in particular was friends with Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, and he uh, I think Pet Sounds was Pet Sounds the answer to Revolver, or I can't remember the dates, but there was kind of a dialogue like the Beatles were doing their experiments, so Brian Wilson does Good Vibrations, and that they were like trying to one up each other. Although, as I say, the Beatles were, in my opinion, far ahead of the game. But you can hear the influence on, for example, the Beatles back in the USSR on the White Album. Listen to the background vocals on that. Very very much influenced by the Beach Boys.
Is there like a typical Beach Boys fan? I mean, were people who were the people that liked the Beach Boys, or just music fans? I mean, would you get music snobs listening to the Beach Boys, or were they just more like kind of vanilla pop music? Do you have any idea about their fan base?
I mean, they perhaps more than anyone were responsible for the promulgation of that California mythos, like California is paradise.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of
But
marketed that to the world.
were they appealing to hippies? I mean,
Well,
or were they too
I
soft
mean,
for that
this
kind
is
of
this is
counterculture?
no, this is kind of a flower power album, literally sunflower. Um, and as I say, they were deeply involved personally in that California scene. I mean, Brian Wilson.
Yeah,
Uh,
but I mean, Grateful Dead are kind of like West Coast, but they're way more spaced out,
yeah,
right?
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the Beach Boys were more about orchestration and creating pop masterpieces in the studio, whereas the Dead is like a jam band, you know.
Right.
Um, but what was I gonna say? Yeah, Brian Wilson uh, took to his bed for years. Like he had a breakdown, too much
I heard
LSD.
about this. Like, there's a song like in my room" kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and
I
then
vaguely know
he had
about
a
that.
song called Fire. Like there was a local fire in the neighborhood, and he was tripping out, and he thought that somehow he had mystically caused this fire, and he got depressed, and someone he had like a financial advisor who was drugging him and stealing from him, and his father was abusive, and there's a lot of really dark drama there behind all of this bright sunny poppy music. And then, as I say,
Right.
Dennis, the drummer, is like hanging out with the Manson family. Um, I read a book about the Manson connection with people. A lot of people, in that Hollywood scene. Well, if you've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you know how those worlds intersected, right? Like
It's
Roman
like Jeffrey
Polanski.
Epstein.
Well, there are some sketchy, disturbing things about it. Uh, but yeah, sunflower.
Okay, let's
We're
do a
we're
really, really fast, even a very crude and even superficial shout out to Van Gogh. Then, just I don't know much.
mm-hmm,
I don't have much that I can add to really help our listener, except to say that I love this series of paintings. He was clearly obsessed with sunflowers, and it's more than just that those five that we see that are set in the vase. He's portrayed them in
mm-hmm,
many different forms. Uh, he liked portraying them in more like dead states, and I admire that. So he appreciated the different states, and he had a relationship with Paul Gauguin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Gauguin,
Gauguin, maybe
Gauguin.
Gauguin. Let's spend 5 minutes on that. Um, who actually painted Van Gogh painting sunflowers in a painting called The Painter of Sunflowers in 1888.
How meta.
And yeah, but yeah, beautiful, beautiful paintings, and I'm excited to be, as I said, to see one of the copies in the National Gallery in London in a week's time. So, should we wrap it up there?
I think so, yeah. Let me just preview next week's episode.
And I want to preview the episode after
coming.
that with like my concepts that I've just mentioned to you. So you go first.
Sure. Well, this has been a long time coming. It was on our preview of season 2, but I think the time has come to finally explore Scarface.
Oh shit. Okay, I didn't know what you were gonna say, so I love that movie. I love it. So that'll be fun.
Let's delve into it next time. And what's after that?
Yeah, after that, I'd like us to experiment and try like a series of voice notes. I'm gonna be traveling to London with my wife. It'll be her first time in the UK, and we have to take different journeys because of the political situation. So I'll be taking a bus via St. Petersburg to Helsinki and then flying. She'll be flying via Istanbul. Luckily, we're both meeting in within an hour of each other at London Stansted Airport. So I guarantee to the listener that just the experience of going in and out of Russia is always rather interesting and slightly scary. So I will report about my experiences with that. It'll be some kind of like journalism. And then I just think I'm sure I'll have a lot of interesting experiences during the week. So I don't want it to center around me, but I think if I report my experiences and then Mark replies with not just validation, but his own maybe thoughts on the things that I'm seeing, I think it could make for an interesting back and forth. And you mentioned, Mark, that perhaps we could do something similar when you go to the Philippines in April.
Right. Well, one question. Is the text your trip or is it the city of London?
I think it's going to be my trip. I hate to be solipsistic, but I think it'll be like a travel journal, right?
Okay. So, yeah, a podcast travelogue.
Yes, exactly. In the tradition of Mark Will's letters.
Do you mean my book, Postcards from the Nordics, which everyone should purchase and read and review?
Exactly.
Okay, then I'm totally down.
All right, so do we have a cool Scarface quote we can end with?
Oh, there's so many. You know, where do we begin? You give us one.
All right.
You need people like me.
Yeah,
you think you're good? You're not good. You just know how to hide. Say goodnight to the bad guy. That's a good one to close with.
Yeah, that's a really good one. All right, thanks everybody for this rather bizarre mixture of Taiwanese history and botany.
Farewell.
Peace out.